How the Jeju Air Flight 7C-2216 crashed. This South Korean airline was granted permission to land from the south on runway 1 northward. But control tower cautions against bird activity, so the aircraft made a slight deviation in flight path. The pilot declares Mayday after it hit a couple of birds, and it was instructed to make a go-around and land on runway 19 southward. It was at this moment the airplane encountered another problem with the landing gear, which did not open. Finally, the plane had to make a belly landing with what was supposedly a landing gear failure because it hit in the middle of the runway and crashed into the elevated localizer antenna and concrete, erupting into a huge fireball, while the tail section remained intact. More details all in the video ahead. Jeju Air Flight 2216 was meant to be a routine domestic flight from Bangkok, Thailand to the Muan International Airport in South Korea. The total flight time was approximately 4 hours and 30 minutes, and the aircraft in use was a Boeing 737-800. The Boeing 737 is a very popular twin-engine, medium-range commercial airliner. On this flight, it was operated by 2 pilots and 4 flight attendants, carrying a total of 175 passengers. It is important to note that the Boeing 737-800, part of the next-generation series of 737 aircraft, is distinct from the Boeing 737 MAX. Let's take a closer look at the airport and its surroundings. The airport is located near the ocean, giving it a scenic yet strategic position. The primary feature of the airport is its single runway, designated Runway 0119, which measures 2,800 meters, which is approximately 9,186 feet in length. While this may seem relatively short for an international airport, it is more than adequate under normal circumstances. For comparison, depending on landing weight and runway conditions, aircraft like the Boeing 737 can safely land on runways as short as 1,500 meters. This is around 4,900 feet. This makes the runway at the airport more than sufficient for standard operations. Now let's move to a top-down camera angle for a broader view. As you can see, the area features known bird feeding and roosting zones. These are distributed across approximately 4 distinct areas, spanning from the southern to the northern edges of the airport vicinity. These zones are important to consider for both environmental monitoring and aviation safety. And finally, we have the localizer. Normally, on an airport with a runway at the end, you don't have a wall-like structure. The concrete structure holds a navigation system that assists aircraft landings and takeoffs. At 4 meters high, it is covered with dirt and was raised to keep the localizer level with the runway to ensure it functions properly. The black box recorder has been transported to Seoul, where analysis began immediately after the arrival of the investigation team. The Ministry of Transport has also released the following detailed timeline of events. At 8:54 local time, Muan Airport Air Traffic Control (ATC) clears Flight 7C-2216 to land on runway 01. Morning 8:57. ATC broadcasts a cautionary advisory about bird activity in the vicinity of the airport. 8:59. The pilot of Flight 7C-2216 reports a bird strike, declares an emergency with repeated. This is what he said: Mayday, Mayday, Mayday calls, and notifies ATC with the message: bird strike, go around. Just 1 minute after the bird strike at 9 o'clock. The flight initiates a go-around maneuver and requests authorization to land on runway 19, which requires an approach from the opposite end of the airport's single runway, that is from the north to the south, which is not the actual landing procedure. Usually then land from the south to the north. 9:01 in the morning, ATC clears the aircraft to land on runway 19. 9:02 local time. The aircraft touches down on the runway approximately 1,200 meters, which translates to 3,940 feet from the threshold of the 2,800 meter. This is around 9,184-foot runway. 9:02 and 34 seconds local time, ATC activates the airport fire rescue unit by triggering the crash bell. 9:02 and 55 seconds later, the airport fire rescue unit completes the deployment of fire rescue equipment. 9:03 Flight 7C-2216 overshoots the runway and crashes into a hill-like structure beyond the runway's end, which later on we came to know that it hit the localizer antenna and its adjacent concrete embankment. 9:10 local time. The Ministry of Transport receives an official accident report from airport authorities. 9:23. One male passenger is rescued and transported to a temporary medical facility for emergency treatment. 9:38. Muon Airport is officially closed. 9:50. A second person is rescued from within the tail section of the aircraft. Authorities are investigating whether the located beyond the end of the runway contributed to the crash. Here's a basic layout about a plane control surfaces. It has ailerons at each wingtip that move opposite one another to roll the plane. It also has elevators at the tail that affect pitch, and the rudder controls yaw or rotation. We'll also take a look at why the tail survived while the rest of the plane was destroyed. From a top-down view, the two surviving crew members can be seen seated in the rear jump seats. In short, there's a myth that survival are linked to seat placement that are positioned near the tail. The remarkable survival of Lee and Kwon is attributed to their seating position at the rear of the aircraft, a location statistically considered the safest during aviation accidents. According to a 2015 study by Time magazine, which analyzed 35 years of data from the Federal Aviation Administration, rear seats had a fatality rate of 32%, compared to 39% for those seated in the middle and 38% for those in the front. Both survivors were found in a state of shock. Lee, who suffered a fractured left shoulder and head injuries, was pulled from the wreckage. Despite the severity of their injuries, she was reported to be conscious and repeatedly asked rescuers, "What happened? And why am I here?" The old frequent flyer adage holds that sitting at the back of the plane is safer than sitting at the front, and the wreckage of both Azerbaijan Airlines Flight 8243 and Jeju Air Flight 2216 seems to support this notion. In the case of the Azerbaijan Airlines flight, an Embraer 109 was struck by a Panzer air defense missile. The plane managed to land on its belly and skidded off the runway. Fortunately, there were no concrete structures in its path, which helped mitigate the impact. What I want to emphasize is that 29 passengers seated in the rear of the plane survived the crash, further reinforcing the idea that rear seating can increase one's chances of survival in an aviation accident. This is an unverified video showing a plane being struck by birds as captured in this low-quality footage of the aircraft flying over the airport. The first screen grab from the video shows what appears to be two small flashes of white smoke emerging from both engines just milliseconds before the left engine ingests a bird. Due to the poor quality of the video, it is difficult to determine whether these flashes are simply engine smokes. However, they could indicate that both engines may have ingested birds. This is the actual footage capturing a dramatic moment where the plane executed a belly landing without its landing gear deployed. As a result, friction between the aircraft's fuselage and the runway caused intense smoke and sparks, eventually leading to visible fire emanating from the plane. While the pilot demonstrated remarkable skill in handling the situation, the landing might have been significantly smoother if not for the localizer antenna positioned at the end of the runway. We make original videos from scratch, so please do subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos.